The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The 1983 Boise City Council Candidate Forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Boise. And now your moderator, Jean McNeil.
Good evening. Welcome to the Boise City Council Candidate Forum, sponsored again this year, as it has been for the past several years, by the Boise League of Women Voters. 3 council members will be elected on November 8th. Those 3 seats will go to the top vote getters out of a field this year of 13 candidates. All 13 of those candidates are with us tonight, and for the next hour they will be answering questions put to them by a panel of reporters. The reporters will take turns asking questions of the candidates in an order determined by lot earlier this evening. Candidates will have 50 seconds to respond. That time limit will be strictly enforced. After the question period is over, each candidate will have 1 minute to give a closing statement. The candidates are seated in the order in which they will answer questions. They are Darrell Babbitt, a print company salesman. He ran unsuccessfully for the Boise City Council in the last election. Mike Wilson, he's a forklift operator for a maintenance company and chairman of the Ada County Libertarian Party. He also ran unsuccessfully for the council in 1981. Fred Kopke is president of a home building company and an incumbent member of the City Council. He has served 2 4-year terms, parts of 2 other terms, and was last elected to a 2-year term in 1981. Mark Hawley is a civil engineer in Boise. He is making his first try for public office. Lyle Cobbs is a real estate broker and a former Republican state legislator from District 16. He served 3 terms in the House and 4 in the Senate before losing bids to return in 1978 and 1980. Beverly Thornburg is making her first bid for public office. She teaches self-improvement classes and serves as District 16 chairwoman for the Democratic Party. Ron Twilliger is president of an investment company. He's a former Democratic state legislator. He served 4 terms in the legislature, including 1 term as Senate Minority Leader. He did not run for re-election last year. Mary Tate is vice president of Tate's Rents, and she serves on the Planning and Zoning Commission and on the Design Review Commission. This is her first try for elective office. Jim Sorrell is a self-employed information and computer specialist. He ran unsuccessfully for mayor in 1981. Don Brannon is a retired Air Force sergeant. He ran for mayor in 1981 but withdrew before the election. He later worked on a committee to recall Mayor Dick Erdley. John Kirk is a public relations manager for Mountain Bell and the president of the Western Idaho Fair Board of Directors. This is his first try for elective office. Dick Buxton served 19 years in the Navy. He is now the Idaho purchasing agent for Mountain Bell. He ran unsuccessfully for the council in 1973 and again in 1981. And Brent Coles is a Boise City planner making his first try for elective office. He is currently on unpaid leave of absence from the city. Those 13 candidates will answer questions tonight from 3 Boise reporters. Anita Devi has been with KBCI Television, Channel 2, for 2.5 years. Her beat includes, among other things, covering the Boise City Council. Tom Knappenberger has the city-county beat for the Idaho Statesman newspaper. He's had that beat for about a year. He has been with the Statesman for more than 3 years. And Don Wimberly covers the city for KBOI Radio. He has had that job for almost 4 years. Mr. Wimberly, we're ready for your first question. It will go to Darrell Babbitt.
Mr. Babbitt, the Boise City Council continually struggles to find enough funding to support essential services. What alternative or additional funding sources would you recommend the City Council seek from the state legislature to adequately fund fire and police services?
Well, we could try revenue bonds again. I guess we'd have to work through the legislature with that. Other things that you could possibly consider is a city sales tax or a city gas tax. I mean, you can sort of take your pick.
Anita Devi, your question goes to Mike Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, you've stated that private enterprise should run the city's fire department. Can you describe how such a system would work?
Well, in Scottsdale, Arizona, it's probably the best known system of the type. Down there it is a subscription service. The average cost to the community of $90,000 is about 25% of what Boise pays. They do cover people who are not covered through the subscription. They will answer calls immediately, they will bill people, and they do automatically respond to people in the outlying areas. And we had a situation here in Boise this past year where a gentleman and his family who live out at the towards the prison, the fire department did not respond to their needs at that time, and their house burnt down, I understand. Under this sort of system, that would not occur. They do respond, and they answer into areas outside the jurisdiction and subscription areas.
Tom Knappenberger, your question goes to Fred Kopke.
Mr. Kopke, as a councilman, you voted 3 times to keep Winmore on as a downtown developer, and yet your campaign literature says you favor mixed-use downtown. Could you clarify for us what type of retail and what type of downtown development you favor now?
Well, I think we all agree on some of the ingredients that ought to be present in a mixed-use downtown. Retail, office, entertainment, hotel, convention center. The list is pretty long. I do believe for us to have a viable and long-lasting redevelopment of downtown that we have to have a certain amount of retail there. The other uses by themselves, I think, will either be slow in developing or will only partially develop the downtown.
Don Wimberly, your question to Mark Hawley.
12 out of the 13 candidates here tonight are highly critical of the present course on downtown. Mr. Hawley, what would be the first step you would take to get the downtown Boise project off dead center?
Obviously, you have to have the cooperation of the whole council, or the majority of the council, to get something through. But primarily, my first step would be to try to abandon the current plan. It's unworkable as it is. I think we need to get it out into the hands of the private developers and, shake it from there.
Anita Devi, we're back to you. Question for Lyle Cobbs.
Mr. Cobbs, what is your viewpoint on the downtown issue, and do you think the mixed-use concept is the way to go?
Well, I certainly believe the Boise City Council must make a clear change in the direction in which they're now going. And I think there is a possibility, if the change is made, Boise downtown redevelopment will occur rather rapidly. Specifically, I believe that we must abandon the regional concept for downtown redevelopment and then go and strive so hard to establish a mixed-use concept. And I think all of us agree that the mixed-use concept is the viable area that we must all try and develop.
Tom Knappenberger, your question for Beverly Thornburg.
Ms. Thornburg, you moved here in 1981. You've been here for 2 years and been somewhat involved in the community, but what qualifications do you have to serve on the City Council?
1 year before we moved here, we had the opportunity to choose the city that we wanted to live in, our family of 6. And my husband Bill and I took that 1 year to look very seriously at the things that 2 major cities that we were very interested in could offer us. The population was important to us, coming from a big metropolitan area. The schools were very important, and of course the environment was. And the environment here is magnificent. The river is unbelievable, and I feel that our striving to find a place that was best for our family was best spent here, and that's why we moved here.
Don Wimberly, your question for Ron Twilliger.
Mr. Twilliger, to what extent, if any, has the new financial disclosure law, which now applies to Boise City Council candidates, hindered or hampered fundraising efforts for local candidates?
Well, it's pretty hard for me to estimate the consequences of the local Sunshine Act that you referred to, which is a bill which I voted for when I was in the legislature. Without question, I think that it is going to spread some light on the way local candidates are financed, and I think that's good public policy, and I support that. In a race such as we have here, there are a lot of interests, competing interests, which I think are going to be involved in these campaigns, and I think the public has a right to know who they are and the extent to which they are being involved in these campaigns.
Nita Devi, your question for Mary Tate.
What do you think of the current council's handling of the water slide purchase at the natatorium? And if you were on the council, would you have suggested it be handled differently?
It's an area in which hindsight is always a good idea. I suspect now that most of us would say that that was a mistake to do that. At the time they made that decision, it seemed reasonable and logical, and I can sympathize with what they did. I think it's probably a mistake to get into that area, kind of an area of service which could be better handled by private enterprise.
Tom Knappenberger, your question for Jim Sorrell.
Mr. Sorrell, if you were elected to the council, what would be your top priority for getting something done?
Open up downtown Boise. It used to be a pioneer community. One of the main problems with this area is that we're a bunch of strangers. We now only know how to judge a book only by its cover. We are exclusive, and we have closed a lot of people out. You cannot design something for a small, unique area like Boise, Idaho, based on other plans. You first allow information to be spread quickly, that the city is open for anyone who wants to have a business here within the framework and within the reasonability of what business is in this area. And then you design the use concept after who is going to be living here and who is going to be trying to make a profit here. And that is one of the main reasons why nothing has ever been accomplished. The plans were never designed for the people who are going to be using them.
We're back to Don Wimberly. Question for Don Brannan.
Mr. Brannan, other than the issue of downtown, what is the single most critical issue facing the Boise City Council today?
I think the most pressing issue, other than downtown, is the financing of the city. And I don't think the city's going to be in trouble this year or next year, but 4 or 5 years down the road, we're going to have some other source of financing. And I feel that the city council should mend fences with the legislature and try and get legislation passed at the state level to tax on a sales tax basis and give some of that money back to the cities and counties to offset the 1% losses.
Nita Devi, a question for John Kirk.
Mr. Kirk, are you in favor of a citizens BRA committee, or should the city council continue as the board of directors, and why?
Anita, I'm definitely in favor of a citizens committee. I think the Blue Ribbon Committee and everything that we had some tremendous things to offer, and to me they were kind of shunned it out and stopped, but I would definitely be for a citizens committee to do the planning.
Tom Knappenberger, question for Dick Buxton.
Mr. Buxton, the city recently decided to replace firemen dispatchers, well, actually to contract the service of the county after first considering to replace them with civilians. Do you support that decision?
I think probably City Council was working on a priority basis, and I think they probably came up with a fairly good decision based on their priorities of the money that they have to spend. And I think this is what City Council is going to have to continue to do. I was not involved directly on their financing of the budgetary process, so I'm not sure whether they had more money or less money, but I do think they probably came up with a good decision.
Don Wimberly, your question for Brent Coles.
Mr. Coles, as an employee of the Planning and Zoning staff, now on temporary leave until after the election, you watched closely the operation of the Boise City Council over the last several years. If you are elected to the City Council, what would be your first recommendation the council do to change its operation in terms of planning and zoning?
Well, in the planning and zoning area, we need to take a look at our Boise Metropolitan Plan. And I think we can do a lot of work in reviewing the West Bench policies. We have some discrepancy between the county's approach to our Metro Plan and our approach. We need to clarify those issues. We need to provide good planning in the West Bench area, allow those that have the money and the ability to develop. We want to maximize the use of our roads, our sewer system, the area that we have there, the schools, and so on. And so we need to do the good planning in the West Bench that we've done in the Southeast. And that would be a #1 priority. I think we can always review our zoning ordinance, which is been in effect since 1966, and we need to continue to review that, update it. We need time and money and manpower to do that.
We finished our first round. We'll return to Darrell Babbitt, and this time the question will come from Anita Devi.
Mr. Babbitt, if you were elected to the City Council, how would you enhance the quality of life that Boise now offers?
Yeah, well, I guess I would just, try to continue with sensible and organized and timely growth to further enhance the Idaho lifestyle. I think the Idaho lifestyle is quite great. One of the things I think that we should particularly do is continue planting fish in the Boise River and continue efforts to keep the beauty there. I think we really have something that is very precious in a clean river flowing through the city, and I think we should do combine our efforts to preserve this.
Tom Knappenberger, question for Mike Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, as chairman of the Ada County Libertarian Party, you would do away with zoning if you could, as I understand it. How would people resolve differences? How would neighbors resolve differences without any zoning to put them in different land use areas?
Well, there are a number of different ways you can go at this. One of the most basic and probably the best systems is to go back to use of deed restrictions and covenants. Now, these are used in a lot of the subdivisions around the community, but in the last few years, it seems like the City Council has, in a few cases, turned up their nose at them and decided they're not important, and what the City Council decides is more important. Also, the best example of this is in Houston, Texas. In Houston, they use a number of local groups who get together and they have the city planning department. They sit down and work out these problems ahead of time. So there is a large advance time there, and there is quite a bit of preparation. It works quite well. We find that the cost of housing is much lower in Houston than it is in other cities with large amounts of planning and zoning.
Don Wimberly, question for Fred Kopke.
Mr. Kopke, if you are re-elected to the Boise City Council next month, what, if any, change in direction in city policy regarding downtown would you recommend or implement as if you are re-elected?
Well, I think our position has evolved where we are abandoning the idea of a regional mall and going to a mixed use. I think a common definition would involve 300 to 400, maybe as many as 500,000 feet of new retail space. I think we'll have to make a choice as to whether or not we select a developer or we select a planner. I think temperamentally I would prefer to work with the developer because I think they'll bring those plans about. I still think it's largely an economic issue. I think that our market had not grown in past years to the point where we had the chance of success that we had hoped for. But I believe as we go into the 80s and as the economic climate improves that we will succeed in the near future.
Anita Devi, question for Mark Hawley.
Mr. Hawley, on the fire dispatch issue, were you pleased with the outcome, or do you think the city should have handled it differently?
As it turned out fairly good, I think, for both parties involved. The firemen were put back into the active portion, and you reach attrition by the levels by natural attrition in the department. I think that the city should have worked a little harder to, at the start of the thing, at the onset of the thing, with the union to straighten it out and make things run a little bit smoother so you didn't have that butting heads involved there.
Tom Knappenberger, question for Lyle Cobbs.
Mr. Cobbs, the City Council is in the process of debating a very strict river protection ordinance. How closely do you think development should be controlled along the river?
The Boise River is one of our most beautiful assets we have in this area, and we're very fortunate to live in a city that has a river such as this. And I think it's important that the people appreciate this with respect to building not so close to the river that it'll deteriorate the beauty of it. Although they have the right, I believe, people have, to live close to the river and enjoy the environment of the river. However, it's important in my mind to have this belt to be continued. I'd like to see it go on as far as Eagle Island. along the river, as it is now stated and being planned, and not to the advantage of any developer, but just to the advantage of the people and the residents who live in Boise.
Don Wimberly, a question for Beverly Thornburg.
Salt Lake City developer John Price has complained today and earlier, somewhat bitterly, that he has not been fairly treated by the Boise Redevelopment Agency. The agency took some initial steps today in an effort to adopt a selection process. What steps would you take to assure that every developer who brought a plan to the BRA would be fairly treated?
What steps I would take? I think the city has taken so many steps to make sure that there is equal opportunity to developers, but I feel that it is imperative that no matter who is chosen, that the citizens of this community must have some sort of feeling that this city council is going to move somewhere on this downtown. And my strong profession is that something happened in 1984. The selection process must stay clear and it must stay fair. But no matter what, something has to happen in '84.
Anita Devy, a question for Ron Twilliger.
Mr. Twilliger, you have publicly stated you might not serve the full 4-year term because basically you are running because of the downtown issue, and when that's solved you may step down. Don't you think that as a council member it's important to be concerned about all issues facing the city rather than one specific issue?
Anita, I have a policy of telling the truth, even when it doesn't serve me. And perhaps that statement has not served me well. Clearly, there are other issues, and in my press conference, I disclosed 5 issues that I think are important in this campaign. But let me say this about that statement. I think that the major issue in this campaign is the downtown, that the lack of building that downtown center has affected adversely the quality of life in this city. And I'm not talking about the inconvenience of shopping. I'm talking about the impact that goes to every corner of the city. And I think it's an important enough issue that it drew me off the sidelines to get in here and see if I could do something about it.
Tom Knappenberger, question for Mary Tate.
Mrs. Tate, how would you go about implementing the city's stated growth policies, which are to encourage growth in the southeast and slow it down in the west?
I would be pretty much in favor of continuing the policies that we have right now. Seems to make sense to me that the smaller area in the southeast provides for denser population. And out in the West Bench area, we can have a little lower density and still provide for some growth and yet allow people to have a little different kind of lifestyle with larger lot sizes and a less dense population.
Don Wimberly, a question for Jim Sorrell.
Mr. Sorrell, what steps would you take to repair the somewhat breach in relationship between the city of Boise and the state legislature? What specific efforts would you make to repair the relationship?
I have seen the evidence of what a welcome mat does in any community. I suggest that we try that. It's been recommended that we try that with our own legislatures. If any capital town opens itself up as a friendly community to accept, it's going to treat anyone who comes in there, whether it's legislators or strangers, it's going to treat them with the same kind of amicable spirit that will make them feel at home. And if you feel at home and you feel comfortable, your business product and what you try to work out in the legislature is going to be from that kind of environment. When you feel comfortable, when you feel like you're welcome there and you're not a stranger invading someone else's property, then you're not combative and you are honestly trying to work. You feel like you're part of a group. You actually feel like you're part of a team effort, which is non-existent in the state of Idaho. There are too many divisions, and no one has the ability to generate the heat necessary to weld the divisions back together.
Anita Devy, question for Don Brannon.
You were opposed to the City Council giving a number of acres out by Gowan Field to be turned into a rural center for birds of prey. Why is that?
that land was set aside for a park. In fact, it already was a park. It was being utilized as a park by lots of people that live out in that area. And that is a growing area. And in the year 2000, when our grandchildren needs a park out there, the land is not going to be available because the city does not have money to run the city now, let alone set aside money to buy parkland. And so we've lost that parcel of land that was going to be a park for our grandchildren forever.
Tom Knappenberger, we're back to you. A question for John Kirk.
Mr. Kirk, you said before that downtown and the suburban mall should be considered as separate issues and should be handled separately. If I'm stating your case right, if a suburban mall is built first, what do you see happening to downtown?
I believe very strongly in competition, Tom, and I think that any kind of action, in fact, I'm more or less on line for a suburban mall, and I don't think the timing makes any difference. But I think in the free enterprise system and the competitiveness that we have, that anything that starts, because the reason that I say all these things is that we're going to lose the mall or the shopping center or whatever to Meridian and some of the surrounding towns because we're getting metropolitan. And I think we have to get with it as far as the free enterprise system is concerned to get these things done.
Don Wimberly, a question for Dick Buxton.
As was mentioned earlier in a question to another candidate, the City Council is considering a very restrictive river protection ordinance and floodplain ordinance. Do you favor the more restrictive approach or giving the City Council some latitude in allowing some development along the Boise River?
I think development along the Boise River is added to the Boise River. Most of it's set back, and so it really is adding to it. There are certain areas that does not have the landscaping that has grandfathered in these areas. And by that nature, like probably the Riverside Red Lion exemplifies this. They've developed it right down to the river, which makes it kind of a nice setting. So I'd give a lot of latitude, because I think we need a lot of latitude. Without doing this, we restrict the creativity of people, and I don't think the city council or government has any control or what I should say, any real insight on what creativity really is. More people involved, the more creativity we're going to have.
Anita Devi, a question for Brent Coles.
Do you feel the city has significant financial problems, and if so, how do you think they should be solved?
Well, in terms of significant financial problems, no. I think we have a budget that we can live with, but we're going to continue to see a tightening of a budget. I think there's no question that in my campaign I'm promoting the idea of going to the legislature and requesting that we see more of that sales tax money funneled back to the local governments. Now that should include education. Education and local governments should see a much more percentage of the sales tax. In Ada County alone, we collect, or the state collects, $30 million. We, the city, receives about $900,000. Now we could use more of that money. We provide the services, the population base, the retail users that spend their money, create the sales tax, and I think the city deserves more of that money.
We'll start our third round now with a question from Tom Knappenberger to Darrell Babbitt.
Mr. Babbitt, you're familiar to the people. You've run for office, I believe, 5 times in the last few years. Why do you keep, unsuccessfully, why do you keep running?
Well, I guess I have the innate desire to be a city councilman and to do something about some of the problems in the city of Boise. For instance, I would like to get downtown off of Dead Center. I would like to work with Ada County, the ACHD, to make sure that the city gets their share of good streets. I think we could use some railroad crossings around town are quite bumpy. They about shake my little man to pieces every time I go over them. And I think that a building that was built down here on Americana Boulevard is in the process of being built now, could at least have been built a little ways further back like the Quinn building was. With the parking in the front, it kind of blocks the view of the Boise River, sure, I think there's some problems. That's why I'd like to be on the city council. I think I could, if given a chance, I think I could perform.
Thank you. Question from Don Wimberly to Mike Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, the Boise City Council in the last year has twice rejected a unanimous recommendation from the City Planning and Zoning Commission to alter the present Metro Plan, which would allow the construction of a regional shopping center outside the downtown area. If you were elected to the City Council and faced with a vote along that line, how would you vote?
I think that we ought to allow construction of shopping centers wherever they're needed. Basically, the need is very flexible there. You get into a problem with denying the people in the West End, where this has been a particular interest, a shopping area out in their area, which would require them to drive further into downtown Boise. Well, that is going to use up more money for them. It's going to cause greater expense for them. Also, that will add to the air pollution problem, which we have a policy in this city of attempting to cut back on air pollution. And also we have a national policy of trying not to use a lot of petroleum fuels. That will also exacerbate that problem. So we need to let shopping centers be developed close to where they're needed.
Question from Anita Devi to Fred Kopke.
Should the present council select a new downtown developer or wait until the elections are over?
As a practical matter, we couldn't implement a selection process prior to that time anyway. I think by the time we request proposals, it's more than likely that the new council people will be known, if not actually in office, and they'll participate in the decision. Even if that were not true, I think it would be wrong for those who are lame ducks, so to speak, to try and affect the future course of the city by bringing that decision about prematurely.
Question from Tom Mappenberger to Mark Hawley.
Mr. Hawley, would you favor keeping part of the temporary 1.5% sales tax to help finance city government?
Taxes are always a tough question. That one, I think, is probably, if it's a temporary, yes, for a short period of time. I'd like to say that there's a great number, many square feet of revenue-generating structures, potential structures that are not on the tax rolls. There's a lot of interest in developing downtown. There's a lot of interest in developing malls out in the country, out in the suburbs of Boise, and those are all revenue bases, and we don't have those now. So we definitely need to get something going there, and once we have that going there, we'll have expanded our tax base. So I think you'll find that will help solve part of the problem. In addition, there's from an engineering standpoint, I think that the monies and taxes dollars that are spent now could be, the methods could be improved. Cost-benefit analysis and so on would greatly affect that.
Question from Don Wimberly to Lyle Cobbs.
Mr. Cobbs, there are 13 candidates here tonight. 3 will be elected, the 3 top vote getters, creating the very real likelihood that the 3 would serve with a minority of the vote cast. What change would you recommend to alter the situation?
Well, I think it's important that the people of Ada County or Boise City elect the 3 candidates at large. I like the idea that I would represent the total city of Boise and not just a district. It's important that the people that select these 3 candidates know that they're candidates. They're the one that put these people in office, and they can go to them if they have a need. Those are elected represents everyone, not one certain group. Nothing in that order except the city of Boise. So let's keep it like it is. I would support that issue.
Question from Anita Devi to Beverly Thornburg.
Mrs. Thornburg, do you think improvements need to be made in Boise's transit system?
Absolutely. From the people that I have spoken with on the streets, and particularly in retirement and nursing home centers, there are very valid needs that need to be addressed by the city in order to serve particularly the senior citizens better. There are specifics that have been spoken to me about in terms of simply making loops through areas where you have large populations of senior citizens. You are all, I say you, but the city of Boise is growing, and the transit, or the transportation of these people to and from workplaces has got to be addressed and be very aggressively addressed, simply because of the population that we have now and are going to have in the future.
Tom Knappenberger, question to Ron Twilliger.
Mr. Twilliger, you said that you're getting on that you'd like to be elected to the council to get the downtown problem solved, and will stay on until that happens. Does that include through the next gubernatorial election?
I have stated, Tom, that the main reason for running was because I was frustrated over the lack of progress on our downtown. I've also stated that I would stay in this, if I'm elected, I would stay in this position until the job is done. And that's a commitment that goes beyond the 1986 gubernatorial election. I don't make commitments lightly. I grew up in this city. My home is 12 blocks from downtown Boise. I'm committed to live in this city for the balance of my life, and I'm tired of hearing everybody complain about city government and nobody does anything about it, and that's why I'm here, and I'm going to stay here until that job's done.
Question from Don Wimberly to Mary Tate.
The Boise City Council took a very controversial step and contracted with the Ada County Sheriff's Department for fire dispatch services. If you were elected, would you recommend that that present system be kept, or would you work to create a Boise fire dispatch system again?
No, I think it's worth trying contracting this service out. I'm not totally in agreement with the way that that decision was made. I'm not sure that it was done in as straightforward a manner as I would like to have seen, but the result, I think, is could be productive for city-county relations, and I think combining services in that area is a good possibility.
Question from Anita Devi to Jim Sorrell.
Are you in favor of free enterprise running the city's parks and recreation programs?
You said free enterprise? Mm-hmm. If we learn how to use the facilities for the wider spectrum of people, free enterprise is going to try to devise some way of making a profit out of it. There must be something that we have in our civic lives that is untouched by profit. Then perhaps we too will be untouched by the things that tend to drag us down. Free enterprise is good in its areas, but there are some things as basic services and basic things that must be available to everyone that should not depend upon free enterprise. We have so much depending upon it, and that's good and that's constitutional, but we do not need other things that competition isn't necessarily a good thing. If members of a family compete within themselves, it generally tears a family apart. So we have to learn what to delegate to free enterprise and what we have to be able to manage.
Question from Tom Knappenberger to Don Brannon.
Mr. Brannon, in the past you've been an outspoken opponent, opponent of mandatory vehicle inspections. That seems to be on the way now. If you're elected, would you work to derail that or to modify it in any way?
That law has been passed. It's duly a law now. And I am a law-abiding citizen, and I will abide with any law that is already passed. But if for some reason there was movement within the city council to repeal that law, everybody in Ada County knows which way my vote would go. I would be against the mandatory auto emissions program because I don't feel it'll do the job. It hasn't done the job in Portland, Oregon. It hasn't done the job in California. It hasn't done the job in Denver, and it won't do the job in Boise.
Don Wimberly, question for John Kirk.
Mr. Kirk, do you advocate the Boise City Council making a decision on the course for downtown before the city election or before the new council takes a seat, or should they wait?
They should definitely wait for the new blood that I think is going to occur and that I hope occurs. Getting people now, or new developers or what have you, and until that time, to me, would be just an exercise in futility. I would hope that they would wait until the new council came on board, and if I were elected to that, I would certainly go for a citizens committee and get it out of the council's hands. Amen.
Question from Anita Devi to Dick Buxton.
Mr. Buxton, what direction should the city's Planning and Zoning Commission take when formulating a new river policy?
In forming a new river policy, I think I had that question basically before. I think it should be fairly reasonable and encourage people to use creativity in the river area. You also have the problem of the floodplain, which, in actually observing our land use planning policies of the past, has never been followed anyhow. We've got park places developed, and most of these other areas have developed anyhow, in spite of most of our various land use policies we've had and planning policies. I don't think it necessarily means that much.
Tom Knappenberger, your question to Brent Coles.
Mr. Coles, do you think the citizens of Boise would be better served if their council members were elected from districts, something like the county commissioners are, rather than one huge race where people are forced to pick 3 out of a multitude?
Well, certainly there are 2 schools of thought. Running as a candidate at large is very difficult. I find that it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time to visit every neighborhood and go door to door and get your name out to every part of the community. I think we could serve on a district basis. I think it would be less expensive. I think districts would find themselves in a position of going to their neighborhoods and the people within their areas and seeking out candidates rather than having us throw our hats in the ring, so to speak, and run because we feel qualified for the entire city. I do not oppose, however, the idea of running at large. I favor the idea of being able to get to know the entire city by going door to door into every neighborhood, but it is very expensive and very difficult for a candidate.
We have time for a couple more questions. We'll go back to Darrell Babbitt, and the question will come from Don Wimberly.
Mr. Babbitt, pursuing the river policy, a very critical decision the Boise City Council must make within the next several months. Do you support a more restrictive policy along the river or a more lax policy for development?
Well, I'll put it this way. I'd like to see a policy restrictive enough to preserve the beauty of the natural beauty of the river. I feel that some building has been too close to the water level and the flood level, and I do hate to see any building that is built that doesn't blend with the river. Something that is maybe too close, or something of an architecture that doesn't blend in well with the habitat.
Anita Devi, excuse me, your question for Mike Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, annexation is becoming a controversial issue facing the city. Do you think more of Ada County should be absorbed into the city limits?
Only if the citizens of that area want to be absorbed into the city limits. If they choose not to, I don't think they should be absorbed in.
Tom Knappenberger, question for Fred Kopke.
Yes, Mr. Kopke, would you have run again for re-election if Councilman Anderson hadn't decided not to run for election?
2 years ago, I thought I was through with city government, and I find that the things that bothered me then are still problems. I'm proud of the services that the city offers, and I think they're appropriate in quality and quantity, but they can't be continued without a more adequate way of funding them. That problem existed 2 years ago, it exists today, and that was a large part of my choice in running. I'd like to continue to work with that problem.
Don Wimberly, we'll take a question for Mark Hawley.
Forgive me if you've had this question before, 3 rounds and a half. Sometimes don't forget who gets what question. What specific course do you favor for downtown? What should the city council do?
Well, I'm in favor of a mixed-use concept. I believe that several means the combining of or locating of several different types of businesses and offices within the area. From Boise, it means offices, retail stores, entertainment, restaurants, convention center in a good atmosphere. I think that the city council should remove itself from just as an overseeing body to see that it falls with some type of plan, but I don't believe that they should control it. I think it should be turned over to the private developers for development.
That is all the time we have for questions right now. We'll now turn to closing statements. Each of you will have 1 minute. Again, you'll get time signals. We'll begin with Darrell Babbitt.
Well, as a city councilman, I would vote toward a speedy completion of a mixed downtown plan utilizing a one-block square park. In the center is a focal point surrounded by attractive offices, nice restaurants, and specialty shops. With possible underground parking as suggested in the price plan. Underground parking garages might trap auto exhaust gases to be filtered harmlessly back into the atmosphere later, benefiting our clean air program. And then, of course, urging that the ACHD makes sure that the Boise City gets its fair share of street repairs, constantly working toward better and longer-lasting streets within our city limits, continuing to the beautification of the Boise River and Greenbelt area, and as in the past, urging heavy plantings of fish in the Boise River, including steelheads. Recommending that city and civic projects be done by Boise contractors and firms using local labor to help stimulate our own economy.
Your time
and
is about
constantly re-examining building codes to encourage better and more affordable housing.
Thank you. Mike Wilson?
In the recent past, there have been a lot of calls for local option taxes and tax reform in order to provide local services for the community. However, I think that we need to turn to alternatives of deregulation and alternative services to provide for what the community needs. In Knoxville, Tennessee, deregulation, a return to private transit systems helped get 2,000 cars off the city streets. That's an estimated savings to the commuter of that area of about 25%. Their cost of commuting. And in Harris County, Texas, there's no zoning just outside of Houston, and the building codes are administered by private lending institutions. The result is that we find that housing costs as much as 30% less than the national average. And in Scottsdale, Arizona, the private fire department there, which provides service to all members of the community, runs at about 25% the national average. The systems are out there. All we have to do is look at them and apply them, have them tailor-made to our community. They'll work.
Thank you. Fred Kopke.
I'm concerned about two aspects of the city as I see it today. The first, as a general statement, is maintaining the quality and the breadth of the services that we offer. We've explored the possibility of use fees. We've cut back. We reduced our workforce 25% in the first year, 1%. And as a result, we've neglected our capital investment. We need a form of popularly supported taxes to permit those services to continue. With respect to downtown, I think a departure into a mixed use, as long as it has enough retail and enough variety to ensure its long-term success, is the way to go. I would defend some of the things that have happened in the downtown redevelopment project. However, it took us nearly 30 months to achieve the parking required to develop the 8 blocks, and that is done. It took us nearly 2.5 years to increase the funding that the public can bring to the site for open space and parking, but that's accomplished. It took us nearly 3 years to settle a lawsuit over the Eastman building, but that has been resolved. We are still in litigation as to how to fund relocating public utilities. But given a new direction and the progress in the past, I think that downtown redevelopment can be accomplished in the near future.
Thank you. Mark Hawley?
Right. I'm in favor of mixed-use concept in downtown Boise. I'm in favor of balanced growth. It should be a controlled growth through planning and zoning. I think that you'll find that most candidates are in favor of doing something downtown. We need to get that back on the tax rolls. Since brevity is a spice of life, I'd basically like to thank the League of Women's Voters for this forum, and also to tell people that the government is and should be responsive to you. And the only way we're going to know that is if you get out and vote. And that's all I really have to say.
Thank you. Lyle Cobbs?
Well, it's my opinion the new council must adopt and have a new downtown plan and under development as soon as possible. And I'd like to have this new development plan adopted no later than June 1st of this year, 1984. one thing about our city council, we do not have a good relationship with the state legislature, and I think that needs drastically improved. They come to Boise, and they're not treated with open arms. We must adhere to their presence and respect them like we do everyone else. One morning you can't kick them in the chins, and then in the afternoon ask for help. And that's what has occurred in the Boise City, and we're not getting the support from the legislature like we should. It's important to work with these legislators, and we're a stepchild, the city of Boise and every city of the state legislature, and we need their support. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here, and those of us on this panel, we urge that you do vote for us, and we need your support.
Thank you. Beverly Thornburg.
I think it is absolutely essential that a new set of faces be put forth in the City Council, because there is an enormous need for this council to show that they have confidence in the citizens, and that confidence has to be returned from them. So in order to gain this, the city has to move in a very definite direction. Specific and absolute decisions on this downtown must be made in order to regain this confidence that the citizens do not have in this city council. We have many things that the city needs to look at. Your transportation, your major suburban mall, which the people are screaming for to be placed in the suburbs. And when we get the downtown issue put to bed, then we can turn around and we can start addressing some of these other things that must be brought forth.
Thank you. Ron Twilliger.
If somebody a year ago had told me that I'd be running for city council, I wouldn't have believed it. But I'm running for this job because I'm not pleased with the current direction and policies of our city government. And I believe that a community is only as good as what the citizens of that community are willing to give. And I can assure the voters of this city that if I'm elected, I plan to be a constant, strong, hopefully articulate voice, and maybe even outspoken at times, on changing the direction that this city is going in. I'd urge your support.
Thank you. Mary Tate.
I was frustrated by what I saw as a lack of action on the downtown too, and that's part of what caused me to run for this office. I was encouraged today by the actions that the City Council, sitting as the BRA board, took in starting a process of opening up the selection of a new developer. I'm ready and willing, and I think capable of working on that process and working with the present members of the council and the newly constituted council to make something happen downtown. Getting started on that issue does point up the concern that there are a number of other issues we do need to be thinking about. Having spent 2.5 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm aware of what it is required to study issues and to make hard decisions about them. And I'm ready to do that as a member of the council.
Thank you. Jim Sorrell.
Don't you people want to be inspired? Don't you want inspiring leadership? Then you're going to have to do something other than what you've done so far. You know, there's a great ignorance that all of us have when we live in an isolated area, the safest place on earth. It is. It's the safest capital in the world. We have a basic ignorance of the very things that work between us. We just don't know each other. The press doesn't even know at this point how to fairly represent ourselves to each other. And I tell you, our ignorance plots against us. We are in our own way, and we're going to have to grow up and mature as individuals, learn how to work as a team with individuals, and also learn how to confront and rebuke each other when it's necessary. These are the things that have proven in every civilization that civilization stays firm together. You know, there's going to be a community that's going to lead this country into the next century, and there's no reason why we can't do it in Boise. We have the benefit of being 25 years back in time. We have the resources, but we're not using them. Thank you.
Don Brennan.
I, too, believe in a mixed-use downtown, but I take an altogether different approach to this. The Idaho Power is about to build a brand-new building downtown that will house many, many office workers. There is 2 banks that are about to build office buildings downtown. And there's also a 4th building that may come online in a matter of 10 years. I believe that these office buildings would anchor the necessary retail downtown Boise and restaurants and community buildings that we need, because the one way to get the people downtown is the office workers. If they're there, they're going to take advantage of the facilities that are there. And this is why I feel that the office buildings should commence as soon as possible. I don't care if you have to give them the land, but get those office buildings going.
Thank you. John Kirk.
I feel that Boise is a sleeping giant without a doubt. I think it should be the showplace of not only Idaho, but the Northwest. And the people that come here, I think, are very down on the looks of the city. One important thing for the time that I have, I really feel that today's the day of the entrepreneur, the person that has wide vision, many, many talents. To sit in that council seat is going to be a very difficult job. If you have tunnel vision, you just have one issue or 2 issues like the downtown. You need a broad perspective, and you need a person that has diversified talent in many fields that can see the big picture and can emote these people and really get some pizzazz in that place and smile once in a while and get the people behind you. That's what I will do if I'm elected.
Thank you. Dick Buxton.
I returned to Boise about 20 years ago. My daughter was 4 months old. At that time was when we started urban removal or renewal, whatever we like to call it. My daughter is now a sophomore in college, or a junior in college, and 20 years old at this time. I believe that we got to recognize what is the real problem. Why hasn't Boise's downtown really developed? I hear that we don't have the parking. Our mayor indicated that there are people that work downtown take up the parking spots so people can't get downtown and shop. Well, if we analyze what a shopping center does and when it operates in the evening and it operates on weekends. We look downtown, we roll up the streets at 5 o'clock every night, and it's also rolled up on the weekends. So what we've got to do is be more of a cheerleader in the city council and encourage these people to build downtown. Price Development is here. They like to do something. Wright Leisure wants to do something. Oppenheimer, these are all local developers. Let's get behind them and develop downtown, and we might have to do it a block at a time.
Thank you. Brent Coles?
I would ask one thing of you, the voting public, when you go to the polls on November 8th. And that is when you see the name Brent Coles on the ballot, that you think of someone with experience in local government. I've worked 2 years as an assistant to a city manager in Artesia, California. I worked 1 year on a redevelopment project in Long Beach, California. And I've worked 3 years inside the planning department in the city of Boise. And I've seen from the inside the challenges that we face into the future. I have a master's degree in public administration. I'm a graduate of a local high school. I believe in myself, and I believe I can provide positive leadership for the city of Boise, the kind of leadership that will guide us into good economic well-being into the future. And I'd like to do it with your help and do it now.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the Boise City Council Candidate Forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters. We'd like to thank the candidates and the reporters who took their time to be with us tonight. And on behalf of the League, I'd like to remind you to vote November 8th. I'm Jean McNeil. Good night.